Hi everybody, my name's Debbie Ireland and I'd like to welcome you to our presentation today on Microsoft Teams. I'm coming to you from the sunny Bay of Plenty in New Zealand, a place called Tauranga for those overseas. And yeah, let's jump into the presentation. So before I do, I just want to clarify that I do have Josh, who also works for Share the Point, helping us today. So he will be able to answer any questions, and there's a little chat window in the top right there where you can ask questions of the panel and see prior questions and reply in line and so forth. You can leave the event here. You can toggle to look at full screen down the bottom, or if you're using Microsoft Teams, you can also see your usual icons that you would along the left-hand side here. And the other thing before I start is I just would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land in Australia, and also as a New Zealander, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa. So thank you for supporting this hui and welcome. There's also the code of conduct, which I'll leave here just for a second so that you can have a quick read through that one. And let's jump in. Oh, and while I'm on that note, a big thank you to the organisers of M365 May. It has been a mammoth task to bring together so many great sessions across this entire month. And I know we've still got lots to go, but lots of effort by the organisers, and thank you to all our sponsors for making it possible as well. So my name is Debbie Ireland, and I have been doing actually a few tips and tricks, little videos, which are only 2-minute ones. And if you want to take a look at them, you can. That's my personal blog. That's my LinkedIn link, which I think Josh is going to put in the comments section. So love to connect with you on LinkedIn, and that's how you can get in touch with me. I am the founder of Share the Point Limited, which has been around for about 13 years, and we do predominantly Microsoft 365 training, implementations, all sorts of help to get you up and running, with a strong focus on the people side of things. We also help people with virtual help desk support and lots of training. And we do the Digital Workplace Conferences, which are annual events in Australia and New Zealand. And unfortunately, due to this pandemic we're all experiencing, they've been cancelled for this year. So if you're anything like me and you've been watching lots of these webinars, I can't wait to get back to in-person events where you can actually talk to your neighbour and connect and network and all that good stuff. So we will be back in 2021 with those. Okay. Oh, one other thing. So we do have, today's it's going to be lots about tips and tricks and all that good stuff, but it's also going to be about things that you need to consider and you need to think of when you're doing your Teams deployment. We do have a course that's all online, and that's all about the how-to. So if you want the detail, if you want a lot more tips and tricks and etiquette and things you should do and all of that good stuff, then it's well worth taking a course and getting that detail and getting the supporting online materials. So we do have that. Right, today's agenda. So I have broken it into 3 parts, of which we have getting people on the same page, and each of these has got a little demo to go with it, but I'm going to talk about, as I said, a lot of the people considerations and things that will help you either revisit what you've been doing with Teams or get started. We'll talk a little bit about building resilience, and we'll finish up with ongoing adoption. And of course, it's all about Microsoft Teams. So getting people on the same page has to be the first thing you do. And for us, this has been a little bit of a journey in itself because we were all using different platforms. And you've got to consider the level of security that is built into some of these consumer apps. But most of all, you have to ensure that everyone's using the same platform or information will be fractured. So you might find in your organisation that the exec team's using WhatsApp to communicate. When you communicate with external people, you're using Yammer. You might be using Teams chats for some things, but not others. We used to use Messenger a lot just for, I'm coming to the office, do you want a cup of coffee and so forth. And it took some change in our process to actually say, right, we're all going to use Microsoft Teams. If you don't establish which platform you're going to use, no one knows where to go, what they should use, or which conversation to join. And there's way too many apps to learn how to use. So you've got people talking about the same thing, but in different places, and there's just so much noise. I thought that image was perfect. Whichever platform you choose one and make sure everyone's using the same one and that you commit to it. So I liked this quote here: expectations are premeditated resentments. Whenever we set expectations, unrealistic ones, that quote should perhaps say, we get disappointed. For example, you go to brunch and you expect your breakfast to be in a certain way. How disappointing is it when it isn't as expected? Or if you do something for someone and expect a certain outcome, you expect someone to act or communicate in a certain way and they don't, and you feel resentful. They, on the other hand, had no idea about your expectations and are acting from good intention. So let's break this down. Perceptions. New ways of working require setting very clear expectations, communicating these, and defining guidelines. Your perception of what a reasonable time frame for a response might be different to mine. If my boss sends me an email at 10 p.m, is she expecting me to reply? Or what about if this is a chat message in Teams? So you need to agree what your perceptions are with your manager and also set your team expectations based on things like appropriate timeframes for replies. Make sure people know that when you will be available for them. So this could be by setting status within teams, setting work hours, communication standards, feedback protocols. And all of this could be in the guidelines that you develop. But overall, manage expectations on time and deliverables. Personal and professional rules provide parameters for everyone. So we do need to help people adjust by determining acceptable use guidelines. And these can include things like etiquette, what old behaviours would translate into in the new wacky work world, what to stop, what to start. It might also mean updating existing accepted usage policies. Oh, well, actually, for that matter, a great time to revise any related policies because many have now changed. So you might have some in place already for other tools like email, or in the case of meetings that may be, well, now online instead of in person. So what are the new norms and what are some of those protocols or those policies that you have that you can just refresh and update so they make sense in today's world? And when you develop the guidance or an acceptable usage policy for teams, consider practices that will help minimise information overwhelm. So things like giving all posts a subject line or making sure reply is used to keep the post threaded, or ensuring posts are all addressed to their intended audience using at mentions or using emojis, things that we'll demonstrate shortly, and establishing what's appropriate use of GIFs or memes or how you want to handle that. Trust is the foundation to success. So this is about open, transparent communication, and that's really the only way to build trust. If you think of email and fax as an example, years ago we'd send a fax and we'd call afterwards to make sure it was received. And we used read receipt a lot more on emails as we didn't trust that it was actually getting delivered or that people were reading it. And so the same applies with Teams and notifications. Until you can actually trust that others are using it in the same way you are, then you won't trust the tool. You need to know you're all using the same platform, you're on the same page, you have notifications set up, and you're actually using them. A little demo here. We're all on different devices in different locations. Josh is in his car on his mobile. I'm sitting in a cafe on my iPad, and Shannon's at home at a dining room table with her children on a laptop. So from my Teams environment, I can see from the notifications on the left here, I have 3 new chats to look at. Taking a look, I can see that Patrick sent me a message and I go to reply, but quickly check the status because he's updated his status here and he's set it to do not disturb. This is a great way of managing when you want people to contact you or not. So you're managing expectations right from the onset. Knowing he's busy, I can then suggest a later time and await his reply. I can see now Josh and Shannon have added to our group chat, and we use this as our main means of communicating. We changed from text and Facebook Messenger, and we only use this now. So I can reply to Shannon's message, and you can see here that because Josh is on his mobile, when he replies, it's showing in line. It only actually works from a mobile or an iPad, actually. It doesn't work if you do that on a computer. I guess that's coming. But he's also specifically mentioned Shannon to keep it clear that he's talking to her. I've also now got a notification that I want to look at in Teams, so that prompts me to look at the content, and this particular message has been marked as important. Another good idea to highlight things. I can see the whole team has been mentioned by looking at the icon, and also by the fact that the name of the team has been used in the message, another rule we internally set. I've also been mentioned, which will appear in my own notifications, and that's really important in terms of etiquette and ensuring all your team are using the same guidelines you set. The subject line makes it easy for me to follow the thread of what the discussion is about, much like an email, and the emojis show me who has acknowledged the fact that they've read the message, which again, we make a rule. If you look at this message above, you can see that Josh has started a new conversation as his reply. This has to be the number one thing that happens. It's therefore a standalone message and it's completely out of context, the most common error ever. So people need to be prompted and reminded to do the right thing, to reply within a thread rather than starting a new one. So you can see here, he's put it in the right message, and given I was specifically mentioned, I'm going to go ahead and acknowledge that. Also, as a way to manage expectations, you can see that we've entered a due date to make it clear what the action is from the message. Very much like email, treat your messages the same way. We could turn this into a task, or I quite like using the save feature here, which saves the message. And it means that I can go back at a later stage and look at what I've saved and check them off as I do the follow-up that's required. Okay, so the second topic is about building resilience. And I actually changed this. I did have overcoming overwhelm, and I think I've spoken about that a few times before. But I wanted to frame it as building resilience. With resilience as your focus, you still lead, whereas with overwhelm, you have that sense that you've already lost. So letting life overwhelm you will only drain your resolve. Instead, we need to find a way to rise and build resilience into everything we do. So how do you win? From a personal perspective, to achieve resilience, you need a strong purpose and an absolutely focused mindset that's based around honouring that purpose. I believe the people who do the best handle stress, anything life throws at them, be it good or bad, are those who have endured failure and built resilience. One doesn't come without the other, I don't think. You embrace your failures, you acknowledge the challenges you've encountered, and you see them as building blocks to building resilience. So you focus on what you can learn and you gain from any experience. While that is in a general life wisdom, it applies in two ways to our topic today. The first one is that you can see the life of teams as incremental or transitional, and you can build on what you have. And the second one is that it helps to build resilience if you deal with the information by putting things in place that prevents the overwhelm. And that's the aim of this one. So I had to find a new way of describing this. So my first diagram just shows that we end up with all this sprawl. So often we talk with clients and their team's deployment has gone off course. This is particularly evident post the COVID lockdown, actually. People rushed to implement teams and it served really well in providing staff with the tools to get on and do their jobs in a remote working scenario. Awesome. In fact, it fast-tracked for many what they have been wanting to do for ages, and their staff now get it. However, the mess in the process has needed looking at. In some circumstances, organisations have allowed the freedom for their staff to create teams, channels, and design their own structure. And for some, this has worked really well, while for others, it's resulted in quite a lot of chaos. And this can leave people feeling overwhelmed when there's no structure to follow. It depends on your organisation, on your culture, and how you've best adopted it. But we have found that this is a lot of what we've been doing, is going back, reviewing, mapping, redesigning in some cases to help companies get what they need. So I just wanted to point out a few ways that you can look at this. I'm looking at the teams one to start with, and I guess first of all, everyone sets up test teams. So we need to get rid of all the test teams. We also need to look at how we archive things. So I've got a team up here called the annual conference team that's no longer needed, and it needs a process for closing it down. So we want to move that into some kind of archive process. Projects are a really good example of that, actually. Then you've got the ones that should have been a channel, not a team. So it might be because of the organisational structure where you've got similar teams, or the audience should be based on reporting lines, e.g. production under operations or whatever, so that the information can be shared across them. Or it could be that it's regional. So you might have the Tauranga sales team, as we do up the top here, and that should be part of the national sales team. And the point here is that you don't want to be part of 10 teams with too much overwhelm and information spread in too many different places. So we'd look to make that a channel instead of an individual team. Then you've got the scenario where it should have been a group chat, like an RFP. So you might have set up a team for an RFP thinking, oh, we need a team for this, and then found out later, I think I've heard this a few times actually, that actually you can just have a group chat and you can share documents within that, and it's only a short-term thing for the life of producing a proposal or an RFP, and you don't need it after that, so it doesn't need a team. And then of course you've got the example where you've got duplication, and people don't know that there's two different ones because they haven't been invited to one or the other. So it could be that they need mapping to combine into one team, and then, yeah, that end up as one team. If we now look at channels, again, you've got your test ones that need deleting. You've got the ones that should have been their own team. So quite often this is things that are cross-functional. So they're created within one team. We're using a project here as an example, but it's applicable to multiple audiences. So the project could have been an intranet review, and it could have been started within the IT team, but then it required input from the business. So it needs to be made into its own team and moved across there. And then you've got ones that should not have ever been a channel. Instead, they should have been a document in a channel. So people start channels because they think, oh, I'll have a channel called roster planning. And then they think, well, actually, what's going to go in there? We're not going to talk about anything. We've only got one document it relates to. So that should have just been a tab or a document in a library, and is not really needed there. And then you've got the ones that are redundant because they were never used. They were built for the wrong purpose. They're too complex. They might be too specific, and they should have just been folders and files. And they didn't even, because of the fact that they don't have any posts or related discussions. And so with those ones, really you need to get rid of them. Admin's a real frequent one, or resources. So people create all these channels. And actually, in fact, if I had two pieces of advice, one would be go through your channels and try and cut them in half, or start with only one channel and then only create one when you absolutely need it. And then the last little example up here is where you've got to look at permissions. For example, managers is a good easy one, because this could have been created as a standalone team, which could be right if the audience and the content suit, but often it could be a private channel in an existing team. So it's just a matter of, you know, making it private. So look at what you can cut out, archive, combine, cut down, and don't start a channel unless you actually need one. It changes the landscape. Right, so think of Microsoft Teams as your desktop. I quite like this analogy, so I decided to make a slide out of it. If you think of your desktop that you have at home with your books and your cup of coffee and your phone and notebook and so forth on them, if you think about Teams in the same way as your desktop, you've got your calendar embedded without needing to even go to Outlook. You've got your to-do list or your diary, which becomes your personal to-do and your team tasks in Planner. You have your journal of jotted notes, which then becomes electronic because you keep everything in OneNote, and that's within your Teams environment. You have paper forms for data capture, and these can be easily converted to Microsoft Forms and again linked within a team. And you may have your briefcase of files that only you use, which are personal documents, and they get stored in OneDrive, which is also all accessible from within Teams. And then below the desk, all of my organisation files sit in SharePoint. Oh, sorry, I forgot one there. The videos. I take, all the videos I take on my mobile, like updates for my team, CEO chats, health and safety videos, all get recorded in Stream, and then they can be accessible from within my team. And Stream is like that internal YouTube within Office 365. And then below the desk, all my organisation files, I can say this now, sit in SharePoint, still within Teams and accessible from the Files tab, but they're hidden from sight unless I need to go directly to them. So I quite like that analogy, and I hope that explains the whole Teams platform or desktop. Okay, the other thing I've been working on that we get asked a lot of is, and I'm just going to pause just for a second and make sure, Josh, no questions I need to think about at the moment.
We do just have one question, Debbie. An attendee wanted to know, what is the etiquette you put in place for working with external team members?
Good question. So external team members, I think a little bit like I just showed the code of conduct here, you can have a little meeting notes tab or something that shows like a code of conduct, but whatever rules you want to set up with your external team, especially if you're the organizer of that external team. But whatever you do, I would have either a OneNote file or using the meeting notes tab within the team, something set up so that people understand what the team's going to be used for, who the audience is, what the expectations are. In fact, I just did that on a project the other day. So similar to the etiquette that I'm going to show or that we go through anyway, things like acknowledging and replying and so forth, and what those expectations are, same thing. It's just that you're going to make it visible for your external team.
Thank you. And we've just had one more come through if you have a quick second. What are things to consider, specifically risks with private channels?
Okay, so private channels, I probably don't have time to get into much detail here, but I would be looking at the things that are created in the background and where all the documents are stored and who has access to that private channel. You know, like if they leave, then is the ownership so that someone else can easily take it over. Should it be its own team? It would be more around the architecture actually. Should it be a private channel like the example I gave, or should it be its own team? And then the permissions are a lot easier to manage rather than managing at a channel level. I don't know. It would have to be answered probably in line with overall architecture.
Thank you.
Cool. Okay, when to use what? And there's some really good resources online for this. So this is us brainstorming internally based on what we've been finding with a few clients. So one of the challenges when using Teams is having multiple ways to communicate. Which one should I use? There isn't one right or perfect answer. It's something that will differ between organisations, maybe even between different parts of an organisation. So it partly depends on the nature of the work, the objective of using Teams, the internal ability or the speed at which people can adapt to change, and what's agreed in the usage guidelines. But if you think of your all your communication in terms of the audience, so who you're talking to, the outcome or the objective you want to achieve, and then the third dimension is urgency, which can dictate the tool that you want to use. So how urgent is the message? And we've made these generalizations about when to use what. So the first one's email, and usually it's when it's not urgent unless it's marked as such, as they can be buried amongst many others. The purpose is often for notifying people of something. So often it's one way, like when broadcasting information. Alternatively, and that's becoming more popular, is to post a video update on a Teams discussion. So think about ways that you might have used email in the past, but now may not, because this is one of the biggest things that Team does, is reduce email. In the past, when you've been used, when you required a reply, you used to use read receipts, and now this can be done in Teams with an acknowledgement and viewed in the chat with that little eye symbol, so you don't need to do that. The next one's chat, and this is where you have a specific audience rather than the whole team. Because it's more direct, it can be used when it's more urgent, but if it really requires a response now, of course, it's best to still use the phone. And actually in this lockdown period, it's been really interesting how people have got just about overwhelmed with too much online communication. It's like, you do realise you can still pick up the phone and talk to someone, and sometimes that's the best way to do things, especially if things are urgent. So chats are good for quick conversations, either on the phone or online, and they're things that used to happen over email. So it's a great way to reduce clutter in your inbox. If you're on your mobile and you have the Teams app, you'll see a mobile notification, and on your desktop, you'll see the banner. So it's nice and easy to manage. Team posts are transparent to the rest of the team, and that's the key thing here. So if they want to or need to track what's being discussed, it is there out in the open, which means I'll have access to what's been discussed if the person was dealing with it, if they were away. And if the conversation happened via email or chat, I wouldn't necessarily have visibility over that. So that transparency is really important. It in turn, well, that means that it allows for more collaboration. So you can get replies or input from team members that direct messages would have missed. Shannon might read something in a post and she can contribute, but if it was in a chat, she wouldn't have seen it. You can also review conversations after being away and be informed or learn from others, and it allows you to collect information from a wider audience by using a poll, for example, inside a post. If this was via email, it would definitely clog up your inbox. You can also post across multiple channels at the same time for an even wider audience, and you may have to wait for replies, so the conversations are not necessarily happening in real time like the other mediums that we're talking about here. And then the last one is meetings. And I'm not really referring to a presentation here, because while you can use a meeting tool, actually we're using live events at the moment for this, that's really more like a live, like a webinar or a live event. It's instructional and it's not necessarily high participation, so there's likely to be a higher number in the audience. I'm talking about meetings that are all about engaging in verbal conversation, not written, versus email. So if it's just to disperse information, message in one way, it really should be an email or a video. It actually annoys me when they set up these meetings and you've got one person doing all the talking, when it could have been distributed just, you know, by an email or a video or an announcement rather than, you know, having to set up a meeting. You also need a predetermined agenda, and that's a must. And therefore, there's going to be outcomes, decisions, actions. So I like to think that a meeting should be limited to 5 or 6 people so that decisions can be made. Otherwise, I think that the meeting should be broken into subgroups, because if you've got a meeting with 20 people in the room, you're hardly going to come away with decisions. Conversations happen in real time, and this is a real advantage compared to the online world, and they're great for idea generation as one discussion sparks another one and thoughts that happen between people because they are real time. Okay, so our next little demonstration is about, first of all, setting up your desktop. And you can see a big part of managing overwhelm is making sure you're set up to manage things like your notifications, your activity, and your desktop in general. So from the activity one, we can use filters to drill into what's important for you. And it's also useful to look at where there are new items. For example, where there's something in bold, if I've had a notification, or where it's got a 1, it means that I've been mentioned. So using the notifications to my best advantage. I also like hiding different channels, so taking them off my desktop when I don't need them and only showing them when I do. And I like doing that with Teams as well. So organizations ensuring that you've actually got your desktop as you need to use them. It's also ensuring you've got your channel notifications set up, or all notifications, and that the Teams environment has been configured. Not just you, but that your whole entire team is aware of this and have set up their notifications too. So it goes back to that trust. Talking a little bit about meetings now, and effective meetings are a great way to manage overwhelm and ensure that your team's focused. So from my calendar, you can see that we have our recurring weekly meeting. And the keys to effective meetings, as I mentioned before, one is the duration. It's very short. It has an agenda and it has a link to the meeting notes. We like to keep our meeting notes in OneNote, of course. So the good thing is I can link directly to the OneNote from here. And this notebook is for the team I'm part of. So there's a section specifically for the meetings, and it uses a consistent template. So I can just go add page and my new template's there. As you can see from the initials, everyone fills in their own part. In our one, we focus on reflections from the prior week, focus on what we're going to do the next week, and we have a little piece on gratitude and some other items at the bottom. I can also add in the meeting details directly to my page, and this looks at my personal calendar. So I can add the related meeting. And if I want to, I can expand out the participants and then go ahead and check them off, make them into a to-do, and check them off as they attend. Now we're in our Teams meeting. And if you could hear the audio of this, because I sped it up, it's actually really funny. But anyway, it's great to see everyone on video, which we encourage. And we can use several tools to make this meeting effective. Each person can share their screen to discuss what they're working on. So for example, Josh uses the whiteboard to share his process flow. And it means that we can all discuss it and mark it up, and different people can add their comments as they want to. It means that decisions are made really quickly. Shannon can then take the screen, and she can show us what she's been working on. And in this case, it is project plan and planner within our team. And so we can go ahead and discuss anything outstanding, the task coming up for the week, and so on. Okay, just for a little break here, we have the competition, and you can go ahead and scan the competition QR code and go in the draw to win a prize. Okay, and I think Josh put a link to that competition in the chat. So yeah, good. Okay, last topic's about ongoing adoption. And I was going to call this I don't know, communication strategies, and then I was looking at continuous improvement. And I think it's a little bit of a combination of all that. It's about fueling the fire and making sure that you keep things happening. So when you start looking at the level of adoption of teams, consider that not everyone engages in the same way. Some people are going to acknowledge that they've seen something, which of course you can also make a rule or a guideline, like I showed when something's been mentioned. Others will participate by joining in discussions or replying, and then you'll have some, and these are definitely not a third. I don't know what the percentages are actually, but anyway, others will lead new discussions. So they'll start new threads of conversation, or they'll prompt engagement from other people. Adoption, however, is not necessarily a result of how many likes you get on a post, or how many people comment, or how many visit a website on your, a page on your intranet. If you measured on that, you could say, well, 500 people viewed this page, so I've got really good adoption. But how many actually read it? So counting views or counting likes is not an accurate measure, or even just the replies, because of the fact that people engage in different ways. So when you look at an engagement, I think the key to it, and I'm not sure of the exact way to measure this, but it's about seeing who not only uses the tool, but who can find new and innovative ways to improve their work practices and lessen the time that they spend doing tasks and improve their productivity. So it's harder to measure, but it's more realistic. You want to try and develop a culture of continuous improvement. And this is by combining innovation, allowing creativity and ability to then reflect and celebrate on what's been achieved. Organisations need to be open and accepting so that people will be encouraged to share their ideas for improvement and also implement them. So look to innovate. This can occur from the management level, within the project team, or with end users themselves finding areas that need improvement. So it can start with addressing pain points, looking at manual processes, finding simple low-hanging fruit, but surely adapt to the new ways of working. For example, maybe the factory staff don't feel involved or valued. Why not teach them how to use Teams on their mobile phone and set up a factory workers team? This means they have a way to chat with each other on the floor, and you can feed in news about what's happening in the rest of the organisation. You have to activate and generate new behaviours by implementing solutions that people suggest. So make sure there's a process for recording any changes or ideas for improvements. A great idea we saw at one organisation was a suggestion box online, of course, where people could freely enter suggestions for ways they thought the organisation could work better. And these were managed by a project team where they were prioritised amongst the more strategic goals. The emphasis here is on actioning ideas presented wherever practical. Then the key is to demonstrate how others' ideas are being implemented. Most often when people see what's been done in another area, they can see how to apply that to their own. And this can be as simple as using OneNote for a specific purpose like meeting minutes, or if a form has been used to collect data, or if a Microsoft team is being used to meet a cross-functional collaboration requirement. It's lots easier when you can just demonstrate someone else using it. And then finally, celebrate the wins and acknowledge new ideas that have been implemented, as simple as they might be. So use communication to further grow your innovation culture. The suggestion box people from the earlier example recognise all the contributions each month, and one was picked out for a prize, which I quite liked. So a few things on communication, and communication can happen in many ways. With Teams, social is a good one to encourage engagement. Here within our whole wide organisation-wide team, we've got a channel set up for social, and we're using a poll to gather feedback from the organisation. It's a simple way to ask people how they want to participate, and then the results are shown instantly on the page. It's also good to share celebrations, especially when you can't be all together. So you'll notice that different people, and we've got one down here about a 21st happening, and you'll notice people interact in different ways. Some like to use GIFs, Many just like to acknowledge their presence, and others will no doubt overuse it or abuse it. So you can choose how you want to manage it as an organisation. But yeah, GIFs are always fun. Actually, you'll notice that the new emojis, if you haven't started using them already, are now available. All you have to do is type a colon and then start typing the first letters to get a selection. So you've got lots more emojis if you like this sort of thing. Innovations and improvements are an excellent way to get communication and engagement happening. So this is just an example of a form, kind of what I talked about before, added to the whole org team, where people can come up with ideas, share what they might have been doing, and add these as suggestions. And then you can choose how they're going to be processed. As your people get more familiar with Teams, it's good to integrate other Office 365 applications and relevant to how an individual team works. For example, I'm going to show you a few. So I can add a PDF for information that's used often. And all of these are added as tabs to a particular channel. So they're relevant to that channel in that team. And it makes it easy to access and read whatever I'm putting up there. I also might want to surface documents that are stored in a different location. So these are my documents within this team, but I'm going to go ahead and add a library from another place so that they're updated in the source place, but they're visible where they're needed. So I've added the templates and forms one in here within my warehouse channel documents. I can also link in. Oh, and then I can open it nice and easily right from that place. I can also link in OneNote, but instead of seeing the entire notebook like I might have linked in other parts of my team, I can say, well, what is this channel for, and what are the activities or the work group, what's the processes this channel is being used for, and then link to a specific area within the OneNote so that it's easy for people to access that information and get on with doing their job. I can add a form, and in this case, so you saw the form before where you could submit data or capture it, but you might want to just display results. So these are results that might have been collected from external sources, but you want to display it so the whole team can see the results. So that's a great way of just adding that. So now I've set up my little desktop within this channel, and it organizes all those processes for a specific work group within my team. So this last thing I want to touch on is about encouraging adoption and making it easy for people to get help. And there's a few different things here that I'm just going to touch on very quickly. One being a help channel. So making sure that you have a help channel, but that it is monitored. So it can't just be that you put one message up and it's left alone. People need to know that they can trust there's going to be someone replying to this post if they put something up there. You want to encourage organic growth and also respond if someone else answers a question. The content needs to be up to date and responsive and timely. So we've been doing this a little bit as a virtual help desk, and one thing we've been doing is drip feeding tips and tricks, kind of like what you can see on the page here. And because you keep this regular, it reinforces the training that you may have given people. And if you've got a whole stockpile of them, it's really easy to keep that flow of information coming. You also want to celebrate the evangelists and define who will be the internal experts. So while sometimes we help with this kickoff and getting all this information and answering all the posts, most organisations need to be able to take that over and have internal people trained up as specific digital transformation specialists or business champions, or however you want to run with that. And then you want to encourage ongoing learning with future training sessions and find out what people need. So giving them either online materials, videos, little drop-in sessions, one-on-one coaching, whatever, all sorts of things. So that about brings me to the end of my time. But before you leave, and I will get back to the Q&A and see if anyone's got any other questions, could you just scan that? And I think Josh is also going to put a link in the thing for me, and tell me what you thought of today's session, because your feedback really, really helps everything that we do. And if you do want further information or to connect with me personally, then please also put your email address in there. And actually, I should have had a big tick on that, because I've done 4 presentations in May and this is my last one. But I think there's a question on that to say, if anyone wanted other presentations, what would you like to see? So yeah, by all means, let us know. And I already showed you that slide, so I don't need to show you that again. I'd like to say thank you to our sponsors. As I said before, we could not be here without them. And I would like to jump back in and see if we have any Q&A that I can answer here.
Hi, Debbie. Yeah, we did have some questions. There was a question from an anonymous user. He actually had 2 questions. Some trouble with notifications in both activity and in Teams. If the whole team is tagged in a post, I'm assuming in like an @mention general. Why does this happen? I only need to get notifications in one place. And the second is
yeah, I can see that. I'm just trying to read it and understand exactly what it's about. It's a little bit hard for me to troubleshoot without seeing a lot of it's to do with whether you're in the app as well, because if you've actually got the app open, you're not going to get the notification. So there's a few rules around that, and you can set up the channel notifications, but I'd have to see what you've set up and what you're actually getting. So sorry, I can't really answer that one. The second question is about, should Teams be used, channels or chats? Is that what you meant, Josh?
Yeah.
For things requiring action. Should Teams be used, channels or chats for things requiring actions? It's easy to lose something. Can you flag an action? Gosh, I am waiting for this one. So that's exactly my issue too, and something that we've been challenged with. I did show you in that demonstration that you can save, and for my own internal process, I look at my saved ones and then I'll turn it into a to-do or into a planner task. And I did that presentation on planner and to-do last week. But yeah, you can't flag it as an action at the moment. You can send a conversation to Outlook if you wanted to. I'm not too sure that that really solves that one. I'm hoping it's coming, and I think it will when they bring together planner and to-do and team tasks. I think I read somewhere. So yeah, great question. Can't wait till it happens. And Cairo, there's a bunch of third-party tools growing up at the moment to make sense of teams and make it easy for people to find their groups, etc. Ensure that people don't make duplicate groups. Do you have any opinion on these? Unfortunately, Cairo, hi, nice to see you. Not see you. Look at your message. I don't know. Been playing with a couple of ones, but not seen anything good. So if anyone's got any suggestions, by all means, please let us know if you've found anything great, because yeah. Oh, and that's a great Mac piece of advice. Thanks, Cairo. What the commando is there. I was just publishing those if anyone else had any replies that they wanted to put in there. Was there anything else I missed? At a very basic level, when would you use a channel versus a team? So when you look at a team, think about the audience it's for and the content. And when you look at a channel, think about it being a work group or an activity within that team. And to be totally honest, if you're going to start and you go, okay, I've got a team, we've got to work together on something. So these are the audiences, the people that need to be in here, and we want to share information. That's what's going to go into the files tab, all for that same audience. then I would start with a general channel and not create any more channels until you have a direct purpose for them.
And just feeding off that last question, Debbie, Julie would like to ask, would you recommend your online help is its own team or a channel within a team?
Another great question, and we've done it both ways. It really depends on the size of the organisation, but in most instances, we find that if you have a whole org-wide team, so one where everyone's automatically added as opposed to a private and a public, the usual team, so the one that has to be set up by the global admin, then that's a really good place for it, but it's a good place as a channel so that people don't have to go to yet another team and they can just go straight to the channel called Office 365 Help or whatever you want to call it. And then you set up your tabs within that to link off to various training materials and so forth that you have. The reason you might have it as its own team is because you might have a channel for each product line. You might have a channel for OneNote and one for Outlook and Word or whatever you wanted to do, or it could be for other applications outside of Office 365 as well. So that would be while it's its own team.
And last one we've got from Steve, would you suggest using the Yammer/Communicator app versus Teams for cross-company collaboration?
I think if you're using Yammer, you would have made that decision, or your IT team or your business or your strategy would have determined if you're using Yammer to start with. So I have seen some incredibly good uses of Yammer in large cross-organization situations, and then I've seen for smaller organizations where they just need Teams. That's all they need because it's simple, it does what they want. But if you are going to use it as a organization-wide tool, I'd suggest you have that whole org-wide team. So look at whether you need both, because I know that becomes very confusing for some companies, and they choose just to go with one, and look at the purpose and make sure that purpose is communicated to everyone. That's my 2 cents. Is that us?
We did have one more that rolled in just on the buzzer. Would you set up a client project as a channel within a specialist team?
Would I? Sorry, where is that one? Can you repeat that one?
Sorry, Debbie. Yep. Would you set up a client project as a channel within a specialist team? I suppose the implication being, or would you just have it be its own team?
Yeah. Yeah. So permissions, audience. So if it's a client project, we would typically have, actually interesting too, because I didn't cover it all, that you can have external networks. But if it's a client, we will most likely set up the project team within their environment, and then we're the external coming into their environment because it makes it nice and easy for them. And if you want people to access it externally and you want to be able to share all that information within that team, then I'd probably keep it as a separate team. Okay, so thank you very much, everybody, and please sing out if we can help you in any way. Otherwise, have an awesome day, and we'll talk to you next time.